Marcus watched in horror as flames consumed his pristine Harley-Davidson, the motorcycle he'd saved 3 years to buy. The 4 men laughed as they walked away, thinking they'd just torched some random guy's bike. They had no idea they'd just destroyed the personal property of a 15-year veteran state trooper who knew every criminal in the county. As the fire crackled and his chrome melted, Marcus felt something darker than rage settle in his chest. They wanted to play games. He'd show them what real consequences looked like. The first thing Marcus Chen noticed when he stepped out of Giuseppe's Pizza wasn't the acrid smell of burning gasoline or the orange glow dancing across the parking lot asphalt. It was the laughter, cruel, mocking laughter that cut through the evening air like broken glass. His Harley-Davidson Street Glide was engulfed in flames. Marcus stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds, watching 15 years of careful savings and meticulous maintenance being devoured by fire. The custom paint job Midnight Blue, with silver flames that had cost him 2 months' overtime, was bubbling and peeling. The chrome exhaust pipes he'd polished just that morning were already warping in the heat. Should have parked somewhere else. "Old man," the voice came from his left. 4 men, probably in their 20s, were backing away from the inferno, cell phones out, recording their handiwork. The one who'd spoken tall, lanky, with a face full of piercings and a Confederate flag. Tattoo snaking up his neck was, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Teach you to take up 2 parking spaces, you selfish prick," laughed another one. This one built like a linebacker, with arms covered in prison ink. Marcus felt his training kick in before his emotions could overwhelm him. 15 years as a Pennsylvania state trooper had taught him to observe first, react second. He memorized faces, noted tattoos, cataloged clothing. The tall one with the piercings leather jacket, torn jeans, steel-toed boots, the big one Eagles jersey, number 11, fresh. Scar across his left cheek. The third one was older, maybe 35, with nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Addict, probably meth from the look of his teeth. The fourth stayed in the shadows, but Marcus caught a glimpse of military surplus clothing and the rigid posture of someone who'd done time. "You boys having fun?" Marcus asked, his voice calm as winter morning. The tall one, apparently their leader, swaggered closer. "Yeah, actually, we are. Maybe next time you'll learn some parking lot etiquette." He held up his phone, still recording. "This is going straight to social media. Rich asshole gets what he deserves." Marcus almost smiled. Rich asshole. If they only knew he'd worked 3 jobs to afford this bike, that he'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner more nights than he cared to count, that every piece of chrome and leather represented hours of honest labor. "Interesting approach to conflict resolution," Marcus said, pulling out his own phone. Not to record it to call it in, but he hesitated. This wasn't just about a burned motorcycle anymore. These 4 had no idea what they'd unleashed. "The hell? You doing?" The big one stepped forward, his bulk casting a shadow over Marcus. "You calling the cops. Good luck with that, Grandpa. Cops in this town don't give a shit about parking lot disputes." Marcus looked up at him. The big one had at least 6 inches and 60 pounds on him. But Marcus had been dealing with men like this since he was a rookie. Bullies who thought size meant strength, who confused volume with authority. "Actually," Marcus said, slipping his phone back into his pocket, "I think I'll handle this myself." The flames were dying now, leaving behind the twisted skeleton of what had been his pride and joy. The heat was still intense enough that sweat beaded on his forehead, but Marcus didn't step back. He'd faced down armed drug dealers, had been shot at twice, had talked jumpers off bridges, and drunks out of beating their wives. For punks in a pizza joint parking lot weren't going to intimidate him, but he wasn't going to flash his badge either. Not yet. "Handle what?" The leader's grin widened. "Your bike's toast, old man. Nothing left to handle except maybe your insurance. Claim hope you got full coverage." "Full coverage," Marcus repeated slowly. "That's good advice." He looked at each of them in turn, memorizing details his training had taught him to notice. The addict had track marks on his left arm, partially covered by a long-sleeved shirt. The military guy had a slight limp, probably an old injury. The big one kept touching his right pocket, probably carrying something he shouldn't be. "Something wrong with your hearing?" The leader stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell alcohol on his breath. Beer, cheap whiskey, and something else. "Marijuana recently smoked." "I said your ride's crispy. Time to call Mommy for a ride home. Mommy's been dead for 12 years, Marcus said quietly. But I appreciate the suggestion. The leader's face changed, some of the cockiness fading. There was something in Marcus's tone, in the way he stood perfectly still while his motorcycle burned behind him. That was starting to penetrate their alcohol-fueled bravado. Look, man, the nervous addict spoke up for the first time. Maybe we should just shut up, Danny, the leader snapped. Don't go soft on me now. He turned back to Marcus. Your bike was parked like shit, taking up 2 spaces in a crowded lot. We did everyone a favor. Marcus looked at the parking lot. It was nearly empty, only a handful of cars scattered across 50 spaces. His bike had been parked legally, within the lines, in a spot he'd chosen specifically because it was away from other vehicles, crowded lot, he observed. What? You said it was crowded. I count maybe 8 cars in a lot that holds 60. The leader's face flushed. Don't get smart with me, asshole. You want to make something of this. Marcus considered the question seriously. Did he want to make something of this? 20 minutes ago, he'd been an off-duty state trooper. Pizza after his shift, looking forward to a quiet ride home through the Pennsylvania countryside. Now he was watching the charred remains of his motorcycle cool in the evening air while 4 criminals threatened him. You know what? Marcus said, pulling out his wallet. I think I do want to make something of this. The leader grinned, thinking, Marcus was reaching for money. Smart man, how much you got? Maybe we can call it even for the entertainment value. Marcus opened his wallet and held up his state trooper identification. The change in atmosphere was instantaneous. The leader's grin died. The big one took an involuntary step backward. The addict, named Danny, made a sound like he'd been punched. In the stomach, even the military guy in the shadows shifted uncomfortably. Pennsylvania State Police, Marcus said conversationally. 15 years on the force. Currently assigned to the Criminal Investigation Division, he put his ID away and looked at each of them again. Now, gentlemen, we have what you might call a situation. The leader found his voice first. You're a cop, state trooper, Marcus corrected. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand the distinction. He gestured toward the smoldering remains of his Harley. You just committed arson, destruction of property, and given the value of that motorcycle, grand theft. That's before we get into whatever else you might be carrying that you shouldn't be. This is bullshit, the big one snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. You can't prove we did anything. Marcus looked at him with something approaching pity. Son, I've been collecting evidence since before you learned to tie your shoes. I've got your faces, your voices, your descriptions, and probably your DNA all over the accelerant you used. He paused. Plus, your friend there has been recording the whole thing on his phone. The leader looked down at his phone, still clutched in his hand, still recording. His face went white. Turn it off, the military guy hissed from the shadows. Turn it off now. But it was too late, and they all knew it. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind their eyes. The alcohol was wearing off. Reality was setting in, and they were beginning to understand the magnitude of what they'd done. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice taking on the tone he used during traffic stops. Calm, professional, absolutely certain. You're going to stay right where you are while I call this in. You're going to cooperate fully with the responding officers, and you're going to pray that the judge you end up in front of had a better day than I'm having. Wait, Danny the addict stepped forward, his hands shaking worse now. Wait, man. Please, I got kids. I can't go back to prison. I just got out 6 months ago. Should have thought about that before you decided to torch a state trooper's motorcycle, Marcus replied, but something in the man's voice made him pause. There was genuine terror there, the kind that came from knowing exactly what prison would mean for someone like him. It wasn't my idea, Danny continued, desperation creeping into his voice. I just owed them money, and they said if I helped them with this, we'd be square. I didn't know it was yours. I didn't know you were Danny. The leader barked, shut your mouth. But Danny was past caring about loyalty. My kids? Man. My ex won't let me see them if I go back inside. Please, I'll pay for your bike. I'll do whatever, you'll pay for my bike. Marcus almost laughed. Son, that motorcycle was worth more than you'll make in 5 years. Custom Harley, fully loaded. You want to know what you just burned? $38,000? The number hit them like a physical blow. Even the leader staggered. 30. Marcus arrived at the state police barracks at 6:47 a.m., 3 hours before his shift officially started. He'd spent the night in his spare bedroom, the one he'd converted into a home officer, all rounded by case files, legal precedents, and a growing list of connections that painted a picture far more interesting than for drunk idiots torching a motorcycle. The coffee in the break room was terrible, as always, but it was hot and strong enough to cut through the exhaustion that came from running on adrenaline and anger. Detective Jimmy Kowalski was already at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, nodding as he scribbled notes. "Yeah, I'll hold," Jimmy said, then covered the mouthpiece. "Marcus, you look like hell. Rough night." "Educational night," Marcus corrected, settling into the chair beside Jimmy's desk. "Tell me about your truck yard fires." Jimmy's eyebrows rose. "Straight to business, huh? Okay, here's what we know. 5 truck yards hit in the past 8 months. Always the same MO accelerant, usually gasoline, always at night, always targeting the most expensive vehicles. Insurance payouts total, about $2.3 million so far." Marcus opened his notebook. "Security cameras. That's the interesting part. Our guy or guys, they know exactly where the cameras are. They come in wearing masks, stay in the blind spots, in and out in under 10 minutes. Jimmy leaned back. In his chair. "Why the sudden interest? I thought you were working the drug corridor cases." "I was, until last night." Marcus flipped through his notes. Tyler Brennan, age 24, Danny Morrison, age 29, Robert Tank Williams, age 20, Jerome Hayes, age 31. He looked up at Jimmy. "Any of those names ring a bell?" Jimmy was quiet for a long moment, his expression shifting from casual interest to sharp focus. "Tank Williams. Yeah, I know that name. He was questioned in connection with the 3rd truck yard fire, had an alibi, though said he was home with his girlfriend." "What kind of alibi? The kind that falls apart under scrutiny?" "Girlfriend was scared, kept changing her story. But we didn't have enough." To hold him, Jimmy leaned forward. "What's your connection to these guys?" Marcus told him about the motorcycle, about the threats, about Tyler Brennan's promise that it wasn't over. Jimmy listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "So they torched your bike," Jimmy said when Marcus finished. "But you think it's connected to my arsons." "I think your arsons just graduated to targeting law enforcement." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Jimmy a series of screenshots. "I spent the night digging into social media. Tyler Brennan's been posting about cops for months. Anti-police stuff, mostly. But look at this one from 2 weeks ago, Jimmy." Read the post aloud. "Time to show these fascist pigs what real justice looks like. They think they can push us around forever, but everything has consequences." He looked up at Marcus. This was posted 2 weeks ago, 11 days before the last truck yard fire, Marcus confirmed. And here's the interesting part. Tank Williams liked the post, so did Jerome Hayes. Danny Morrison doesn't have social media, but I ran his associates. Guess who he's been seen with at 3 different bars in the past month? The other 3. Bingo. Marcus flipped to another page in his notebook. "I called in some favors, ran some background. Tyler Brennan works part-time at a security company, the same company that installed the camera systems at 2 of the truck yards that got hit." Jimmy whistled low. "Inside information. Gets better. Jerome Hayes did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Came back with a dishonorable discharge for stealing equipment. Danny Morrison's been arrested 4 times for meth possession, twice for burglary. And Tank Williams. He's got a juvenile record sealed, but I know someone who remembers arson burned down his neighbor's shed when he was 16. You've been busy. I've been motivated." Marcus closed his notebook. "These guys aren't just random criminals, Jimmy. They're organized, they're escalating, and now they've made it personal." Jimmy's phone rang, interrupting them. He listened for a moment, then hung up with a grim expression. "That was the lab. The accelerant used on your bike. It's a match for the accelerant used in the truck yard fires. Same brand of gasoline, same trace additives." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. So this wasn't random. Doesn't look like it. The question is why you? Marcus had been asking himself the same question all night. I think they were sending a message. Think about it. They could have slashed my tires, keyed my paint, broken my windows. But they chose fire. They chose arson. That's not about parking spaces or random vandalism. That's about showing what they're capable of. But why target you specifically? That's what I need to find out. Marcus stood up. Where are they being held? County lockup. Judge denied bail for Brennan Hiscott to prior assault charges. The others made bail, but they're not allowed to leave the county. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. They're out. Danny Morrison's sister put up her house for his bond. Tank Williams had cash $15,000, which is interesting for a guy who's supposed to be unemployed. Jerome Hayes got a lawyer. Some expensive suit from Philadelphia who showed up at arraignment this morning. A lawyer from Philadelphia. For a guy who lives in a trailer park. That's what I thought. Jimmy pulled out a business card. Richard Steinberg, Steinberg & Associates, big-time criminal defense firm. I made some calls. He usually doesn't take clients who can't pay a $50,000 retainer. Marcus studied the card, so someone's backing them, someone with money. That's my thinking. And if someone's paying for high-end legal representation, that means they've got a lot more to lose than just some arson charges. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, told you this wasn't over. Pig. Next time, it won't just be your bike. Marcus showed the message to Jimmy, who swore under his breath. They're supposed to have no contact with you, Jimmy said. This is a violation of their bail conditions. It's also evidence. Marcus screenshotted the message, but more importantly, it's confirmation. They're not done. What do you want to do? Marcus looked around the familiar bullpen detectives at their desks, phones ringing, the constant hum of investigation and justice. This was his world, his territory. These four punks thought they could intimidate him here. I want to show them what happens when you threaten a state trooper in his own house, Marcus said. But first, I want to find out who's really behind this. 20 minutes later, Marcus was sitting across from Danny Morrison in interview room 2. Danny looked worse than he had the night before, shaky pale, with the telltale signs of withdrawal starting to set in. His lawyer, a public defender who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, sat beside him taking notes. Danny, Marcus said, his voice conversational, you look like you could use a friend. My client has nothing to say, the lawyer interrupted. Marcus ignored her, keeping his eyes on Danny. You know what I think? I think you're in over your head. I think you've got mixed up with the wrong people. And now you're facing arson charges that could put you away for 15 years. 15 years, Danny. Your kids will be adults by the time you get out. Danny's hands were shaking. He kept looking at the door like he expected someone to walk through it. But here's the thing, Marcus continued. I don't think you're the mastermind. Here, I think you're the fall guy. I think Tyler and Tank and Jerome have been planning this for months. And they brought you in because they needed someone expendable. That's not, Danny started, then caught himself. Not what? Marcus leaned forward. Not true. Or not what they told you. Don't answer that, the lawyer warned. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Danny the threatening text message. Someone sent me this 2 hours ago. Someone who's supposed to have no contact with me. Now, I know it wasn't you. You're sitting in a cell. And I know it wasn't Tank or Jerome. They're too smart to use their own phones. Which means it was Tyler. Tyler, who promised you that helping him would square your debt. Tyler, who's now violating his bail conditions and dragging you down with him. Danny stared at the phone, his face going even paler. You want to know what's going to happen next? Marcus continued. Tyler's going to get arrested again. His bail will be revoked, and he's going to tell the prosecutor that this whole thing was your idea, that you talked him into it, that you're the one with the criminal history, the drug, problems, the desperation. He wouldn't, he would, he will. Because that's what guys like Tyler do when they get cornered. They sacrifice the weak to save themselves. Marcus leaned back. Unless you get ahead of it. Unless you tell me what really happened and who's really behind this. The lawyer put her hand on Danny's arm. Don't say anything. But Danny was looking at Marcus with something like hope in his eyes. What would happen to me if I cooperated? Danny, the lawyer warned. I'd talk to the prosecutor, Marcus said. Explain that you were coerced, that you cooperated. With the investigation, instead of 15 years, maybe you're looking at probation, community service, mandatory rehab. You could be home for Christmas. Danny closed his eyes. When he opened them, the decision was made. The marina office smelled like expensive cologne and old money. Marcus stood at the reception desk, his state trooper uniform pressed and his badge prominently displayed. Watching the young woman behind the counter grow increasingly nervous as she made phone calls. "I'm sorry, Officer Trooper," Marcus corrected, Trooper Chen, "but Mr. Castellano isn't available today. Perhaps you could make an appointment." "No appointment necessary." Marcus smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Hear about the arson investigation. I'm sure Senator Castellano will want to cooperate fully with law enforcement." The receptionist's face went pale. She picked up the phone again, whispered urgently into it, then hung up with shaking hands. "He'll see you now." Slip 47, the white yacht with blue trim. You can't miss it. Marcus had been right, you couldn't miss it. The yacht was easily 60 feet long, probably worth more than Marcus would make in his entire career. Two men in expensive suits stood on the deck, watching him approach. Neither looked happy. Senator Richard Castellano was shorter than he appeared on television, with the kind of artificially perfect smile that politicians perfected, and the eyes of someone who'd sold his soul so long ago he'd forgotten what it felt like to have one. The man beside him was younger, maybe 35, with the soft look of someone who'd never worked a day in his life, but the predatory awareness of someone who'd hurt people for pleasure. Trooper Chen Castellano called out as Marcus approached the yacht. "I understand you wanted to speak with me about some kind of investigation." Marcus stepped aboard without being invited. Beautiful boat, Senator, must have cost a fortune. Amazing what public service pays these days. Castellano's smile tightened. "This is a family investment. My nephew Vincent and I share ownership through our holding company." Vincent. Marcus looked at the younger man and saw the family resemblance. The same weak chin, the same entitled sneer. "Vincent Castellano. You're the one with the insurance fraud charges that mysteriously disappeared last year." "Those charges were dismissed due to lack of evidence," Vincent said, his voice carrying the particular arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "Lack of evidence," Marcus repeated, "or lack of witnesses willing to testify. Hard to maintain witnesses when people's property keeps mysteriously catching fire." The two men exchanged glances. Castellano gestured toward the yacht's cabin. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." The cabin was appointed like a luxury hotel, sweet leather furniture. A full bar, windows offering a panoramic view of the marina. Marcus remained standing while the two men sat, a deliberate power play that wasn't lost on anyone. Trooper Chen Castellano began. "I'm not sure what you think, you know. I know that Tyler Brennan, Tank Williams, Jerome Hayes, and Danny Morrison torched my motorcycle 2 nights ago," Marcus interrupted. "I know they've been responsible for at least 5 truck yard fires in the past 8 months, resulting in over $2 million in insurance payouts. I know that Jerome Hayes has been receiving payments from someone with significant resources, and I know that Danny Morrison is currently in custody, very eager to cooperate with law enforcement in exchange for a reduced sentence." Vincent Castellano's face had gone white. "You can't prove any connection between us and those—" "Shut up, Vincent," his uncle snapped. But Marcus had seen what he needed to see. Fear, panic, the knowledge that their carefully constructed scheme was falling apart. "Here's what I think happened," Marcus continued, settling into a chair across from them. "Vincent's insurance fraud operation was bringing in good money, but it was small time. Burn a few cars, file some claims, split the payouts. But then he got greedy, started thinking bigger, truck yards, commercial properties, millions instead of thousands." Castellano's political mask was slipping, revealing something uglier underneath. "This is all speculation, Trooper. You have no evidence, but he needed better criminals, smarter ones, more organized. So he recruited Jerome Hayes, knew about explosives and surveillance. Jerome brought in Tank Williams for muscle, Tyler Brennan for inside information about security systems, Danny Morrison because they needed someone desperate enough to take the fall if things went wrong." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed them the threatening text messages. "But then I started asking questions, getting close to connecting the dots. So Vincent decided to send me a message, burn my bike, scare me off, show me what could happen. If I didn't back down, this is ridiculous," Vincent sputtered. "You can't. The problem with criminals," Marcus continued, ignoring him, "is that they're criminals. They get caught. They get scared. They make deals." He leaned forward. "Danny Morrison spent 3 hours yesterday telling me everything he knows about the marina meetings, about the payments, about the plan to target other law enforcement officers who got too close to your operation. Castellano stood up abruptly. This conversation is over. You have no warrant, no evidence, and no authority to board my property and make wild accusations. Marcus smiled again, and this time it was genuinely amused. Actually, Senator, I do have authority, and I do have evidence, and as of this morning, I have a warrant. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Jimmy? Yeah, we're ready. Slipped 47. Through the yacht's windows, Marcus could see police boats approaching from 3 directions. State police vehicles were pulling into the marina parking lot. Uniformed officers were walking down the docks. What? What is this? Vincent's voice cracked like a teenager's. This, Marcus said, standing up, is what happens when you burn a state trooper's motorcycle. The first officers to board were Jimmy Kowalski and Detective Sarah Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit. They were followed by Agent Patricia Cole from the FBI's Public Corruption Division. Senator Richard Castellano, Agent Cole announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud, witness intimidation, and corruption of public office." As the handcuffs clicked around Castellano's wrists, he looked at Marcus with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've done. I have friends, connections. This will never stick." Maybe, Marcus agreed. But here's the thing about friends and connections: they tend to disappear when the FBI starts seizing financial records and offering plea deals. Vincent was arrested next, his legs shaking so badly he could barely stand. As the officers led him away, he turned back to Marcus. "My uncle will destroy you for this. Your career is over." Marcus walked to the yacht's railing and looked out. At the marina, at the expensive boats, and the wealthy criminals being led away in handcuffs. His reflection stared back at him from the water of 15-year veteran state. Trooper who'd seen his motorcycle burned and his life threatened, who'd been targeted for doing his job too well. "Vincent," he called out, "your uncle's career is over, mine's just getting started." By evening, the scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. Financial records seized from Peninsula Holdings revealed payments totaling over $300,000 to Jerome Hayes over the past year. Vincent Castellano's personal bank accounts showed deposits that correlated exactly with insurance payouts from the truck yard fires. Phone records confirmed dozens of calls between the senator's office and Jerome Hayes in the weeks leading up to each arson, but the real breakthrough came when Tank Williams, faced with federal charges and the prospect of 20 years in prison, decided to follow Danny Morrison's lead and cooperate. Marcus was in the observation room, watching Agent Cole conduct the interview when Tank dropped the bombshell. It wasn't just about the insurance money, Tank said, his massive frame slumped in the plastic chair. The senator, he was planning something bigger. He kept talking about sending messages to cops, about showing law enforcement that they weren't untouchable. "What kind of messages?" Agent Cole asked. He had a list, names of cops who were causing problems for his friends. Judges who weren't playing ball, prosecutors who were too aggressive. Tank looked up at the camera as if he knew Marcus was watching. "Your name was at the top of the list, Trooper. But there were others. A lot of others." Marcus felt ice in his veins. This wasn't just about insurance fraud or even political corruption. This was about a systematic campaign to intimidate law enforcement, to create a climate of fear that would allow criminal organizations to operate with impunity. Agent Cole leaned forward. "Do you have this list?" Jerome had it, but he made copies. Said it was insurance, in case the senator tried to cut him loose. Tank managed a bitter smile. "Looks like Jerome was smarter than we thought." 3 hours later, federal agents were executing search warrants on Jerome Hayes' apartment, Tyler Brennan's trailer, and a storage unit rented under one of Vincent Castellano's shell companies. The storage unit yielded the biggest prize-detailed surveillance files on 12 law enforcement officers, including photos, daily routines, home addresses, and family information. Marcus stared at his own file, thick with photographs taken over several weeks. Jerome Hayes had been thorough pictures of Marcus, leaving his apartment, shopping for groceries, stopping at Giuseppe's Pizza, pictures of his motorcycle in various parking lots, even pictures of Marcus's ex-wife and teenage daughter taken outside their home in Philadelphia. "They were planning to escalate," Jimmy said quietly. "Your bike was just the beginning." "The beginning of what?" "Agent?"